Since the beginning of recorded history, the written word and the spoken word have been the two most powerful mediums for changing the world. The spoken word, famous speeches, sermons, rallies, and calls to action, such as Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech and President John F. Kennedy's Ask Not What Your Country Can Do For You, and Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. These all and many more have relied heavily on the written word, both for their content and for their transmission after they have been given. In short, the written word has formed the basis for every major speech, for our education, our learning, and our spiritual growth, and has formed the bedrock of every major revival in world history. The Seventh-day Adventist Church has always had a close connection with the literature ministry, but in this regard it is not unique, but rather it's treading a well-worn path that previous movements and revivals have followed. The first 5 books of the Bible written by Moses, the Psalms written by David, Revelation written by John, these and all the other books of the Bible have inspired and changed lives up until this present day. The Bible is the most translated, printed, and read book in human history. The words in Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 2, write the vision and make it plain upon tables. The words to John in Revelation chapter 1 and verse 3, blessed is he that readeth, and chapter 21 verse 5, write, for these words are true and faithful. These help to show a biblical mandate for preserving and sharing what is written. If the writers of the Bible did not write down, we wouldn't have access to this limitless wealth of knowledge, wisdom, and transformational information. Writing changes lives. After John wrote the book of Revelation towards the end of his life, we then move into the time period of the early church, where Christianity struggled against much persecution for a few centuries. Following the conversion of Constantine and the subsequent compromise, we then see a time period of full-blown corruption, with the union of church and state beginning in the Roman Empire in 538, before moving into the time period known as the Dark Ages. One of the key characteristics of the Dark Ages is that the written word in the form of the Bible was prohibited from being translated and published in the local language. Slowly but surely, the darkness was peeled back. First, John Wycliffe, the morning star of the Reformation, arose in England, translating a copy of the Bible. Then John Huss and Jerome in Bohemia preached the gospel in the language of the people in Prague. Then Martin Luther in Germany added huge impetus to the Reformation with his movement of reform, strongly aided by his German translation of the Bible. One of the key ingredients in the Reformation in the 16th century was the invention of the Gutenberg printing press in the mid-15th century. Gutenberg's printing press ensured that what the reformers wrote was able to go viral. Luther's 95 Theses, for example, was reprinted and distributed widely throughout the country. His thoughts, ideas were able to quickly be disseminated and spread. His writing changed lives. William Tyndale followed with an English translation of the Bible, which history has shown had a lasting impact on the English language, just like Luther's German translation had on the German language. As influential English philosopher Francis Bacon, commenting in 1620, said that 3 inventions had changed the recent world as he knew. Gunpowder had changed warfare, the magnet for creating compasses and enabling easier exploration, and the printing press, which enabled ideas to sweep across Europe and the oceans of the world. To print a Bible now required paper, and whilst this was still expensive, It was still easier than the 300 sheepskins or 170 calfskins that previously needed to be collected to produce a single copy of the Bible. Gutenberg's printing press meant more access to information, more dissent, more informed discussion, and more criticism of authorities. As such, the printing press played a key role in popularizing ideas associated with the new Protestant faith during the European Reformation, allowing the press to shape and channel a mass movement. The printing press removed control of written content from the Catholic Church and made it difficult for the Church to prohibit the spread of what it regarded as heretical ideas. The written word began to shine light into people's minds. As society experienced some fundamental shifts, the English, German, Swiss, French, and Scandinavian Reformations gathered pace, and Protestantism became embedded in European culture. The 1700s witnessed some major changes, one of which was the birth of the United States of America, a land built on the ideals of religious freedom. We also see the great missionary movements launch, which were closely tied to the beginning of the British and Foreign Bible Society and the American Bible Society. As the written word spread around the world, there was a huge focus on translating it into the language of the local people. Unlike other holy books, since the time of the Reformation, the Bible and other Christian literature has always sought to be as adaptable and accessible to new people groups as possible. The late 1700s also saw the Great Advent Awakening, a revival movement based on the reading and preaching of Scripture. This was followed by the Millerite movement, which culminated in the Great Disappointment, which looked for the return of Jesus in 1844. From the tears of this great disappointment, the stream of Adventism would form, and literature would play a key role in the birth, growth, and expansion of this new movement. Literature played a key role in early Adventism, both as a means of evangelism and also as bringing a sense of cohesion and togetherness amongst the believers. Literature was integral prior to the Great Disappointment, but this pushed on with renewed vigor after 1848, when Ellen White had a vision that showed her husband should produce a magazine and that it would be like streams of light that go around the world. In July of 1849, James White packed copies of The Present Truth into a borrowed carpet bag and walked the 8 miles to the post office in Middletown, Connecticut, taking the first steps to what would be a global publishing ministry. Let it be small at first, and as the people read, they will send you means with which to print, and it will be a success right from the start. Elsewhere, Ellen White wrote that our publications needed to be scattered like the leaves of autumn, and if there was one work more important than another, it is that of getting our publications before the people. Our early pioneers understood the power of literature. They knew the reality of when Ellen White said that our publications can go places where meetings cannot be held. In 1853, the Review and Herald bought its first printing press, and they operated from the house that James and Ellen White rented in Rochester, New York. They then moved to Battle Creek, Michigan, and it continued to grow. The Review and Herald was instrumental in early Adventism. They kept theological advancement going, and they helped to foster a sense of unity amongst the believers. Our early pioneers all wrote books: James and Ellen White, Uriah Smith, Stephen Haskell, J.N. Andrews, and J.N. Loughborough, to name but a few. Literature was pivotal. In fact, the need to register the printing press under a company was one of the reasons that led to the incorporation of our church in the 1860s. As the importance of literature grew, the means of spreading it wasn't limited to a shop front, but rather missionaries or literature evangelists would take books and magazines from door to door. The first literature evangelist who would sell books from door to door has a very interesting story. In the 1880s, James White met a young Canadian named George King who desperately wanted to be a preacher. He stayed with the Whites for a few weeks, and James was unconvinced that he had what it took to be a preacher. James White then approached Brother Godsmark and told him of George King's desire to preach, and asked him if he could work on his farm for a year, and then maybe at the end of the year, he would be ready to preach. He was a tall and slim man, and as he lived in this new home, he would often preach in the living room to the empty chairs. Soon it came time for him to preach his first sermon, but it was a blundering failure and anything but to the point. After a season of prayer, the mother of the home told him he could never be a preacher or hold the attention of a crowd, but he could be a fireside preacher and take books and tracts into people's homes and spread the message that way. He took this as the will of God, and the next Monday he took a satchel filled with tracts and $2 and set off for the week. The next Sabbath he was overwhelmed at how much God had blessed him. He was encouraged by all the people he had been able to talk to, as well as the 62 cents that he had earned as well. The next week he was able to sell nearly all his tracts, and soon persuaded the brethren at the Review and Herald to make a special book designed to sell in the homes, Thoughts on Daniel and Revelation by Uriah Smith. And so the work of literature evangelism began with the man that James White didn't know what to do with. The literature evangelism work would spread and grow and become a huge ministry in and of itself. Canvassers or colporteurs would go around the country spreading the message, raising up believers and churches, and pioneering a way forward. Colporteur Ministry page 8 says that the importance of this work is fully equal to that of the ministry. As our church expanded beyond the borders of the United States, literature would again play a crucial role. It was the discovery of a piece of literature in Switzerland that prompted the believers in Tramalan to send a request to Battle Creek that a missionary be sent out. The church sent J.N. Andrews, the ablest man in our ranks, and he set about establishing a printing press in Switzerland in the French language, thus fulfilling what Ellen White had said, that our publications should go everywhere, let them be issued in many languages. As the church then expanded to the South Pacific, Africa, Asia, and South America, this understanding of ministry went with it. The ministry of the church has always been most effective when the four branches of ministry have equal importance: the preaching of the word and local church ministry, the education work, the health work, and the publishing work. When all four branches work harmoniously together, the church is able to move forward at its strongest. Today, the literature work serves several purposes. It has an evangelistic purpose, to go where the living preacher cannot go. It also serves to educate and inform the church about new ideas, and it has a nurturing and discipling impact upon the church. Spiritual life today cannot be maintained through images alone. It must involve written content to feed and nourish the mind and soul. The spread of ideas in every culture has always been enabled by print in some form. In ancient Egypt, there were the hieroglyphics. The Bible still exists today in some original form through the Dead Sea Scrolls found in Qumran. And in Reformation times, the Gutenberg press enabled the spread of ideas. Today we are living during another digital revolution, but once again, the written word still has the potent impact to change people's hearts and minds and bring revival to our lives and the lives of others. There are over 20,000 literature evangelists in the world today and almost 2,000 people working in publishing houses to facilitate the spread of literature as a means to educate and inspire mankind to live a better life reflective of God's intentions. We are living at an exciting time in Earth's history, at a time when we believe Bible prophecy is fulfilling before our eyes, at a time when the coming of Jesus is near. We know that before Jesus returns, the gospel will be preached to every nation, language, and people, and an integral part of that final proclamation will be the publishing and literature ministry. Ellen White, commenting on this work, says that in a large degree through our publishing is to be accomplished the work of the other angel of Revelation 18, who comes down from heaven with great power and who lightens the earth with his glory. May you and I commit to reading more for our own spiritual growth and nourishment as we seek to be like Jesus, and also to incorporate the ministry of literature into our personal everyday lives and also into the witnessing culture of our local churches.